going to be incredibly important that we avoid a catastrophic, unnecessary Republican shutdown of government.
Republicans and folks like Donald Trump, they've been absolutely horrible for American auto workers.
Breaking news in the media business, Rupert Murdoch, who is 92 years old, has just announced that he is stepping down as chairman of Fox News Corporation.
Hello, I'm Robert Costa in Washington. Welcome to America Decides. The House is now done voting for now after failing to advance a defense spending bill for the second time this week. Right now, a possible shutdown looms. Multiple Republicans have broken with Speaker Kevin McCarthy to oppose the measure. McCarthy is struggling to unify his party to keep the government open. This all comes amid calls from some conservatives to oust him as Speaker. Sources tell CBS News the Office of Management and Budget will hold its first shutdown preparation calls with all federal agency heads tomorrow. CBS News congressional correspondent Scott MacFarlane joins us now. Scott, the House has failed to advance a defense spending bill for the second time. Looks like lawmakers are preparing to go home. Is this a crisis moment for McCarthy?
It is. This is a fundamental and pernicious problem and quite a moment here in Congress, which is racing toward that October 1st deadline to pass all the spending bills and avert a painful shutdown. And as it races, the U.S. House has just stalled. What collapsed on the House floor today is something that is so fundamentally easy for Congress traditionally that it's an ominous sign moving forward. It wasn't just a procedural vote. It was a procedural vote to move forward and fund the military. Funding the military is something that is popular and necessary in every district in America. It's the easy stuff. The Republicans couldn't muster all the votes they needed on a party line vote, and they're insisting on party line votes right now. So that bill failed. There's no firm schedule as the night began as to when to put it back on the calendar. There's nothing else on the calendar of the other bills that need to pass to avoid a government shutdown. No indication a continuing resolution to give themselves some more time, a snooze button of sorts, is going to pass the U.S. House. It's just stalled amid the race, Bob.
With lawmakers preparing to go home, what does that mean for Speaker McCarthy? Does that mean he wants them to just cool off a bit back in their districts? Is it just a simple whip count situation? He doesn't have the votes, or might as well let people go back to their districts?
That could certainly be part of it. I mean, there's certainly people who want to go home to tend to matters in their district with their constituents. It's also Yom Kippur on Sunday and Monday. There's a different issue, though, at play. You need to have enough support to recess, to go home. You have to have enough people who say, yeah, let's go back home, come back next week, give this another try. And it wasn't clear as the night began that there are a sufficient number of people willing to go home. So some of that's still in flux. And everybody's mindful of what awaits them. At this moment, the U.S. Congress has not passed any of the dozen appropriations bills needed to keep the government open. There hasn't been put on paper a continuing resolution to avert a shutdown that both parties will agree to. And they would have, 4 or 5 days beginning Tuesday after Yom Kippur to get that done? That's just impossible. So there's a realization, if not an expectation, the government shutdown is imminent. That means the idling of hundreds of thousands of federal workers. Bob, it means delays getting passports, visas, education benefits, VA benefits. It means many federal workers forced to stay on the job without a paycheck. And so many Americans live paycheck to paycheck. And the reality is, Bob, even though Republicans seem resigned to the fact they're going to get a lot of blame for this, everybody hurts politically. Everybody hurts in general during a shutdown. It's everybody's constituents who take a punch.
Let's listen to House Speaker Kevin McCarthy.
We talked about a lot of different things. I thought it was a very good, I thought it was a direct, I thought it was productive. I raised issues with them, we're very concerned about accountability.
Scott, take us inside the negotiations. What's McCarthy referring to?
Well, what's unique about these negotiations, based on what we've seen over the past couple decades here during standoffs and shutdowns, is in the majority party, for Republicans, every faction seems to have somebody at the table. The Freedom Caucus is in the room. The Freedom Caucus has ideas as to how to keep the government open without shutting down, and they seem to have reached a partnership with some of the more moderate lieutenants of Kevin McCarthy. That's distinctive. But they can't get the entirety of the Freedom Caucus in there. And with these narrow margins of just 4 or 5 votes to lose, There are holdouts. There are holdouts who have a big megaphone, a big platform, and have the ability to make a lot of noise through them when they hold out. And all of this is going to be a persistent problem unless or until Republicans view a bipartisan deal in the world of the possible. Now, the problem solvers, that group of Republicans and Democrats who try to bridge a middle ground, they've come up with a plan to have a continuing resolution before October 1st. It has some things Republicans like, a few things Democrats don't dislike. But at this point, leadership is still trying to get this done with Republican votes only. And at this point, on this day, after that simple vote collapsed, it doesn't appear that's in the realm of the possible.
What about the tensions inside the GOP on another front? Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky on Capitol Hill seeking support, especially from Republicans who are hesitant at times to offer more financial support for that U.S. effort abroad. Where does that stand? Has Zelensky, based on your reporting, been effective in making the case to those on the fence in the GOP?
It was quite a juxtaposition today, watching the optics of Zelensky's visit here at the Capitol side by side with the Republican leader in the Senate and the Democratic leader in the Senate, all at once speaking with one voice that this is important to do, that the U.S. has to aid the war effort to help Ukraine fight back Russia. But minutes later, and I do mean minutes later, there were members of the House who helped vote down that defense bill who said one of the reasons they did so was because they don't support the Ukrainian aid in the bill. So there is this faction of Republicans in the House and Senate who are unequivocal in their opposition to further spending. Nobody here supports Ukraine losing or Ukraine drying up in its resources. But there are certainly disagreements as to how to fund this, who should be funding it right now. Some Republicans think Europe could chip in more money, and U.S. taxpayers have dug deep in their pockets already. But those disagreements are manifesting themselves on the day Zelensky visits, 10 days before a government shutdown. And it's a symptom of a bigger problem. Relationships are fracturing at a moment fences need to be mended.
And quickly, Scott, finally, Speaker McCarthy has been threatened before by Congressman Matt Gaetz, politically speaking, in terms of holding on to the gavel in his speakership. As you talk to members of the House GOP, what's your read on whether McCarthy is actually vulnerable of losing his position in the coming months?
Let's start with Congressman Gaetz. I spoke with him. He says there are now multiple motions to vacate, motions to challenge Speaker McCarthy circulating. There's no date certain on bringing them. A bipartisan agreement to keep the government open might expedite that. But Bob, there still remains this fundamental reality that has helped Kevin McCarthy since January. There's no name circulating as an alternative, and you can't beat something with nothing.
Scott McFarlane, as ever, opening his notebook for us here on America Decides. Thank you, Scott. We appreciate it. And as President Biden ramps up his re-election bid, his campaign manager, Julie Chavez Rodriguez, is addressing the state of his bid. She sat down with CBS News' Ed O'Keefe to discuss the race.
So let's start big picture. With about 400 days to go until Election Day 2024, the state of the race is what?
Well, the state of the race is exciting. We're seeing so much enthusiasm out there, really in support of the president, the vice president, the agenda that we've put forward, and really our record of accomplishments that we've had over the past 2.5 years. As we've seen our coalition of support continue to grow, we've had major endorsements from 18 labor unions, environmental groups, women's organizations, most recently gun safety groups. So we're just continuing to really build that base coalition and continuing to really reach out to our election voters.
And that is a good foundation for any re-election campaign to start with. But there have been questions raised, a lot of concern expressed. Let me walk through some of that first, and then we'll move on to some other things. There are still some Democrats who believe that there should be an open Democratic primary. On a scale of 0 to 100%, President Biden will be the Democratic nominee. Where on that scale, 0 to 100?
I'd say 100%. What we're seeing is a stronger and more united Democratic Party than I know I've seen in my lifetime. The Democratic National Committee has never been stronger. They won, record elections in the midterms. Over the past, now it's up to 40 special elections that we've seen in 23 alone. We have seen, Democrats outperform. And so we're continuing to just really build on that record of success, that record of accomplishment, and that real unity. We have a national advisory board made up of governors, members of Congress, mayors that are all united behind this president and vice president because they have seen really directly what they've done in their communities, in their states, how they've improved, the lives of Latinos and so many others. As we look at lowering costs, addressing, the sort of exorbitant cost of prescription drugs, $35 insulin, all of that is making a real difference in people's everyday lives, not to mention the record low unemployment that we're seeing, job creation, bringing manufacturing back. All of that has really unified our party behind our agenda.
We'll have more of that interview with President Biden's campaign manager ahead. What's she saying about how Latino voters are responding to the Biden-Harris campaign? You're streaming America Decides. Welcome back to America Decides. Former President Trump holds a commanding lead, as you know, in the polls over his Republican primary opponents. CBS News senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe as President Biden's 2024 campaign manager, Julie Chavez Rodriguez, if they are expecting a rematch.
Based on what you're seeing, is Donald Trump the nominee? Is it over on the Republican side?
We're not going to kind of make any predictions about, who our opponent's going to be. At the end of the day, though, we're going to ensure that everyone understands, no matter who our opponent is, they're coming with the same extreme agenda that we've seen time and time again, whether it's from folks like Trump or DeSantis or whomever else may be. But at the end of the day, we know that we're just going to continue to really put forward the president's accomplishments, his vision for the country, the fact that he has brought this country together under, such divided political times, and he's going to continue to do what he can and use his experience to pass historic legislation to make sure that we're creating, a new clean energy economy and really building for the future, not taking us backwards like so many of these Republican nominees want to do.
There are questions about his age and his abilities and whether he's going to finish the second term. As somebody who sits with him face to face on a regular basis, what do you think is the biggest misperception?
I'd say that his experience is second to none, right? His ability to be able to bring this country together, to tackle some of the biggest issues that we faced, in some instances, for decades, really, shines through. His ability to, make sure that he's being kind of thoughtful and strategic and not allowing kind of the political winds of the day to impact his judgment, but to instead stay focused to ensure the kind of stability and the kind of leadership that this country needs right now. And that comes with, the experience that he brings to the table.
And you've worked alongside the vice president as her state director when she was a senator and then on the campaign. What's the biggest misperception of her?
I'd say that, the vice president has been so politically potent, and we just have to look at the midterm elections as the most recent example of that. Her ability to get out, to meet the moment, and to ensure that, we are, really bringing our message and really helping to ensure that, she is able to show that we're, continuing to fight for the people. She has a career, as you know, in being the district attorney of San Francisco, being the attorney general of California. That's always a position that she's taken, is really fighting for the people, and that's what she's continued to do and continue to show throughout our administration.
Let me get you real quick to talk about Latino support specifically, because I was struck in our poll from last week that found, like every group, support for the president right now is down versus 2020. Notably, or at least what I found most interesting, more Latinos think it's more likely former President Trump will win next year than President Biden. More Hispanics say only Trump and not President Biden is healthy enough to be president. 2/3 of Latino respondents in our poll say things in America right now aren't that great. How do you convince them otherwise?
Well, part of it is getting out and making sure that we're, again, reaching them and ensuring that they understand the accomplishments this administration has brought forward. When you look at Latino unemployment, it's record low. The creation of Latino small businesses, it's the fastest than it's been in decades. We've had 10.5 million new small businesses created under this administration. 25% of those are Latino small businesses. We've invested $11 billion in Hispanic-serving institutions. So all of those are a record of accomplishment that we know matter to Latinos. Affordable health care is another one that we know is crucial. And
so you know that, but how do you get out there and tell them that or remind them of that in the next 400 days?
Yeah, we are actually up on air already, reaching out to Latinos. We have, historic ad campaign invested earlier than any presidential election in both English and Spanish, but also in Spanglish.
I've seen that.
I was so excited. Honestly, that was like my favorite of the entire suite of ads that we put out, because I think it speaks to, definitely to me, to younger Latinos and young Latino voters who are, bilingual, bicultural, just really, have that sense of identity, but also, are different than their parents' generation. And we have a new ad that's coming out, that'll be coming out later today, called La Diferencia, or The Difference. It'll be in English and Spanish as well. And just reminding folks, again, the choice, and reminding Latino voters the choice that they have before them. A president and a vice president that are fighting for Latino workers and fighting to ensure that we're increasing wages and protections for Latino workers, versus, a Republican Party that continues to ship jobs overseas, that continues to attack immigrants, that continues to, really just has been horrible for the American worker.
I know our time is limited, but I want to get you to respond to some of what some voters told us last weekend in Pennsylvania. And these are voters who voted for the president in 2020.
I think he's too old to be president right now. Like, he doesn't know what's going on right now.
I see him diminishing as far as his energy and the public life. I mean, it's like he had to drink a Monster drink or something just to stay awake. You know what I mean? Like, he's really just very tired, and the job is arduous. So, I mean, you need someone with a little more energy level. I think that will put him down.
I think he needs to be in front of voters to show that he's not the sort of doddering old man that the Republicans are trying to make him out to be.
What do you make of all that?
Well, I think that it's important we continue to show the work that the president's doing day in and day out. The most recent trip that he took overseas to the G20, I think it's a perfect example of, the kind of schedule that he continues to keep, the kind of, hard work that he continues to do on behalf of the American people, and the fact that he continues to show really strong, steady leadership at every turn that, is not just helping to protect democracy here at home, but also abroad. So many people are looking to him and to his leadership, and he's continuing to really step up and to show up both here in the country and on the international stage.
Great interview from Ed. And Rupert Murdoch is stepping down from his leadership role. We take a look at what ripple effects this might have on the GOP 2024 field. You're streaming America Decides.
We had a lot of papers stacked up. In fact, you could hear the rustle of the paper, and nobody said I did anything wrong, other than the fake news, which of course is Fox, too.
Welcome back to America Decides. That was one of several recent instances of former President Trump calling out Fox News. And today, Rupert Murdoch announced he is stepping down as chairman of Fox and News Corp Media Holdings. His son, Lachlan Murdoch, will now take over that media organization. The 92-year-old's relationship with Trump was obviously fractured due to Fox News' coverage. And last month, it was reported that Murdoch encouraged Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin to jump into the 2024 race. CBS News political director Finn Gomez is here at the table. Finn, Rupert Murdoch, 92 years old, but in no way really retiring from the political scene, has a heavy hand in politics, has a heavy hand in media. He's leaving the company, but Fox News remains a presence in the Republican primary. They're hosting a debate next week. But to what effect if Trump's not engaged with Fox News in any serious way?
Well, it still matters because you also have the rivals to Trump still going on the show. You see him every day. You see, Nikki Haley. You see Vivek Ramaswamy. He's on virtually every hour. You see it's still.
But they're not picking up.
They're not. But
so does Fox provide the fuel that they really need, that it used to provide
No,
when we were
not-
covering 2012 and 2016. It
Right.
seemed to provide rocket fuel if you were on
Right.
Fox News.
Absolutely. In full disclosure, I did used to work at Fox, but it's different. It's different in those previous cycles. In those previous cycles, that was the only place to go to, right? Now it's more of a fractured on, if you have on conservative TV, you have Newsmax, you have, OAN, you have all these
Or
streaming.
former Fox News host Tucker Carlson on X.
On X, so it's just more distributed. It doesn't have that same sway that it did even in 2022 or 2016.
I think the
2020.
Carlson development is so key beyond Murdoch
Huge.
deciding to retire. Carlson going to X. So many people who are close to Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, they were expecting Carlson, if they played to him, if they had a relationship with him, at least professionally,
Right.
in terms of getting his audience to pay attention to their campaigns, that would be something that there would be a Tucker Carlson primary within the Republican primary. But now Fox has exposure to Republican voters. A lot of them watch it, millions of them watch it. But you see Murdoch, his hand, whether it's leaning toward Youngkin or anyone else, hasn't really gotten anyone into the double digits.
It hasn't. It hasn't. I mean, it also said that, I think, Bob, that also says a lot about this cycle, and just where we are with this cycle. And you also have the Trump trials and all these things, all these other factors that we didn't have before that are having an impact, you know what I mean? But I do think, but at the same time, there's still a big enough concentration of Republican primary voters that, it still matters. There's still sway. There's still an impact. You see it, and it wouldn't be. And Fox, and Trump still, he still appears on Fox, all the time, or at least sound bites or whatever it is. If you're talking about Tucker Carlson on X, like if you remember during the first debate, where did Trump go? He went to Tucker Carlson's show on X, and it got something like 100+ million views or whatever it was, and that is significant. I mean, it just shows that it is such a different cycle, but it still matters.
Lachlan Murdoch, any insights?
You can cue the Succession theme song, but I do think it doesn't. I think it will remain to see if he can still hold the same sway that his father did.
Well, I think it's more than just the sway. I mean, Lachlan Murdoch's going to have to make a decision. Is he going to be the next Rupert Murdoch, or is he going to bring it in a different direction? The separation of Fox and News Corp already has raised questions about how do the children really want to use these entities to influence. Rupert Murdoch, to see him retire now at 92, he's been such a singular influence on global politics. I mean, so many prime ministers in the UK.
Europe, Australia.
In Australia, where he started. He has been changing, and he has many critics who think his efforts have been harmful to democracy across the world. He has many fans on the right who think he has broken through with conservative media, and he has powerful assets, the Wall Street Journal, beyond the New York Post, beyond everything we've discussed with Fox News.
No, absolutely, and I also think that he also specifically with Rupert. I mean, even though he has stepped down, you mentioned Glenn Youngkin. Yes, it didn't have this huge impact that maybe it perhaps once did, but Youngkin is still being talked about, right? And there is some significance to that because the November 7th elections that we have been talking about this.
That's the challenge going to be, though, if he wins Virginia, if they win the General Assembly in Virginia, you have about a month before the Super Tuesday states have their ballot deadlines in December. So that'd be a rush campaign for Youngkin. If he got in, let's say in early to mid-November, he has really a month to get on.
But if he wins, he can galvanize some voters that remember 2021 cycle, and it could cause a little bit of momentum for him.
Well, we'll be in Richmond, I'm sure, on election night,
Absolutely.
November 7th, 2023. America decides then, and America decides tonight. Finn Gomez, thank you. That does it for today. Thanks for watching. You're streaming CBS News.